Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to planning. Beautiful day. We're getting very lucky. Hope everybody enjoyed the weekend. We will dive right in. It is moved by Councillor Karen, second by Councillor Hunter. Be it resolved that the council agenda as presented on October 22nd, 2024 be approved as amended, and that at the request of the applicant, the zoning application ZA08-2023, Lougheed and Bowens, Brock Street, public meeting and associated bylaw be removed from the agenda to be returned to a future planning council meeting. Can you vote on that? Councillor Johnson, did you want to speak to it?
No,
Oh.
I couldn't find my button.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that carries. Thank you. And council, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to mention that in abundance of caution, I had declared on the first application, which was just removed. So I just wanted to point that out, that Madam Clerk has all the necessary paperwork. Thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk, for clarification, will she be obliged to do it again the next time, or is that sufficient for when it comes forward the next time?
Thank you through the chair to all of council. Anytime a matter is on the agenda that a member has a conflict with, it needs to be cleared at each meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we will go over to Councillor Robinson for our land acknowledgement statement, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We would like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the First Peoples who for thousands of years before us were and are still the keepers and caretakers of this land, where we now live and work, and in particular the Chippewas of Rama, Wata, Mohawk First Nations, and the Moon River Métis. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. We recognize all the generations of Indigenous people and their historic connection to this place, and we are grateful for the opportunity to gather here at this time.
Okay, thank you. This afternoon, there are 5 public meetings scheduled for 4 zoning bylaw amendments and 1 Shore Road closing. Application number ZA 10-2024 McIntyre. Application number ZA 23-2024 for Siglin and Rowan. Application number ZA 2024 for Clipsham. Application number ZA 30-2024 for Agnelli, Barafato, and Spears. And application number Shore Road Closure 03-2024 for Franklin. The Planning Act requires that a public meeting be held before council decides to pass a zoning bylaw amendment or close a shore road allowance. The public meeting serves 2 purposes. First, to present to council and the public the details and background to the proposal, and second, to receive comments from the public and agencies before a council decision is made. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the public meeting. The Manager of Planning Services, Adam Ager, will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of public meeting was circulated. Staff will then advise of the purpose and effect of the proposed zoning amendment and provide any additional information that is relevant to the application. Staff will further summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the applicant will be requested to make a presentation, followed by questions or presentations from the public, either in favor or against the proposal. Council will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, staff, or anyone giving presentations, the proposed zoning bylaw amendments and Shore Road closing, and then be considered by council later this afternoon. If anyone from the public in the council chambers would like to request notification of the decision of any application, please complete the form provided on the back of the table, at the back. I will now ask the Manager of Planning Services to advise how, when, and to whom notice of the public meetings were circulated. Mr. Egger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice of the public meetings concerning the proposed zoning bylaw amendments were sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 meters of the properties and subject to the proposed bylaw and emailed to applicable agencies. Included within the notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposal, a site plan, and a key map showing the location of the subject property in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, Chapter P13. The public notices concerning the proposed shore road allowance closure was advertised in the news and notices page on the town's website for 2 consecutive weeks prior to this afternoon's meeting. Included with the shore road allowance closure public notice was a legal description of the lands affected and the date of consideration by council. The circulation concerning the proposed shore road allowance closure was provided in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Act 2001, Chapter M25, and the town's procedural bylaw.
It is important to note that should council pass any bylaws this afternoon, there is a 20-day appeal period during which time the applicant, the minister, or a specified person, as defined in the Planning Act, may appeal the decision of council. During this appeal period, no building permit may be issued or other work commenced. Also, in the event there is an appeal, and in order to be kept advised of a possible Ontario Land Tribunal, members of the public must request and be sent a copy of council's decision on the application. I now declare this portion of the meeting to be a public meeting to deal with application number ZA10-2024 for McIntyre. I will now ask the Manager of Planning Services to please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed bylaw and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application. Mr. Egger?
Thank you, Your Worship. The subject property is located on the Severn River and abuts Rockcastle Road and Graham Road. The property is designated waterfront area in the official plan and is zoned residential waterfront RW6. Actually, I'll back up one. The property is within an existing rural and residential rural waterfront area that consists of lands being developed with existing waterfront lots to the southeast, as well as larger rural land holdings to the west and north. The application before council this afternoon is a rezoning application to rezone 2 portions of property. The application was submitted concurrently with a consent application which proposed to create 1 new lot. The severed lot, which is indicated here in red, which I'll show in a blown up version, and then retain the larger land holding in green. As previously noted, currently right now the property is zoned residential waterfront in its entirety. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment would have the effect of rezoning the retained lands, which is the parcel outlined in green, to residential backlot RB7, which would be consistent for how the lot will now be configured, as it will no longer have any water frontage. It will also permit a reduced lot frontage of 20.9 meters on Rockcastle Road, where 150 meters is typically required. And with respect to that, the existing driveway to access the retained lands is not proposed to change. So they already have 20.9 meters and access the retained lands where a dwelling is already built. From that, so no physical changes for access would be resulting from this application. In addition to that, it's also important to note where the official plan talks about having 150 meters of frontage on a year-round municipally maintained road. The subject lands actually have that on Graham Road. You can see that to the north up here. However, there is a large portion of EP lands, so using that portion to access the property would not be practical, as they would have to put a driveway through environmentally protected lands to get down to the existing dwelling, and they're utilizing the already existing driveway network in place. In addition to that, a site evaluation report was completed specifically for the severed lot. And as part of the rezoning application, it rezones specific development envelopes, as there are some hazard lands on the subject property, specifically the floodway and the flood fringe, which is shown in the bottom right hand of your screen. And then, as you'll see in the site photos, there's also some topographic constraints, some very steep rock slopes, where the site evaluation report noted that development should not occur on that. So the zoning bylaw amendment would specifically define where building could and could not occur. With respect to agency comments, the deputy chief building official provided comments that the building department's confident that on the severed lot, they're able to establish the minimum size septic system on the property, so there's no concern there. And they just wanted to advise the applicant that they should be cognizant of that and that they might not be able to build the scale of dwelling that they might be hoped to. They're limited in size of the septic system, so they just wanted to make that clear in their comments. The manager of revenue, the infrastructure technologist, and the district municipality of Muskoka all had no objections with the proposed application. So then this is moving in to the site photos. This is from Rock Castle Road and then getting onto the existing driveway. This gets you both to the retained lands, which are going to be or proposed to be residential backlot, as well as the amended site-specific developable waterfront lot. This is on the retained lands. This is the existing dwelling. This is then turning into the site. So this is a flat portion which could be developed as observed on site. It's hard to see in this photo, but the floodway and flood fringe were quite evident on site. You could see just a difference in vegetation of the lands that were flooded compared to lands that were outside of those areas. It's also worth mentioning we did conduct all these site visits with the deputy chief building official as well, who was able to confirm that. This is another reason the site evaluation report was done. This is the steep topographical rock slope on a portion of the severed lot. This is then, the slope is to the right-hand side of your screen. The Severn River would be to the middle left-hand side of your screen, and another flat portion where development could be sited outside of those development constraints. This is then turning from that vantage point, looking towards the river from the flat area, and then turning around back up to the rock slope where development is not to occur. And this is getting on the back side of the rock, and then moving more to the central part of the property where again, there was evidence of large flat available land that could be developed, as well as space that needed to be protected for the floodway and the flood fringe. It's staff's opinion that the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the official plan, is appropriate, and represents good planning. As a result, staff are recommending that the application be approved, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you. Does the application have a presentation they wish to make? Okay. Oh, come on up.
My name is Bobby Leppington of Design by Bobby. I'm just letting you know their agent is not here. They're unsure of how to proceed.
So I would suggest that, I mean, you're welcome to plead your case. It sounds like staff is recommending approval. So unless there was something you wanted to add, as the applicant, you're welcome to speak on your own behalf. So if you don't want to speak, that's fine too. You don't have to. So, okay, great. All right, so with that, I'll ask if there's members of the public who wanted to speak to this application. Okay. Seeing none, council, are there any questions for Mr. Ager or the applicant? Well, they didn't speak, but they're here if they had any questions. Okay, I don't see any. Okay. With that, Mr. Ager, are there any recommendations or comments to bring to the attention of council as a result of these proceedings?
Your worship, staff would recommend that the application be approved.
Okay, thank you. The bylaw will be considered by council later this afternoon. If there are no further questions, then I declare this public meeting to be concluded. I now declare this portion of the meeting to be a public meeting to deal with application number ZA 23-2024 for Siglin and Rowan. I will now ask the Manager of Planning Services to please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed bylaw and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application. I will now, okay, Mr. Ager, I was going to keep on going, but go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. The subject property is located on Loon Lake. The property is designated waterfront area in the official plan and is zoned residential waterfront, RW 60 in the town zoning bylaw, and as discussed in the staff report. Existing structures on the property include the main dwelling with a covered deck at the front, a sleeping cabin with decks, a shed, and a dock. According to assessment information, the dwelling and the 2 sleeping cabins have existed since the 1960s. The second sleeping cabin was removed earlier this summer as it was falling apart. Council may recall this application was previously before them at last month's meeting, September 24th meeting. At that time, it was determined that the natural shoreline buffer would actually be less than what was circulated. And as a result, in accordance with the Planning Act, staff recommended that the application be deferred so the correct number could be circulated. So in saying that, the application before you is to permit a sleeping cabin to be located and expanded within the shoreline development area, to recognize the front and side yard setbacks for a covered patio at the front of the dwelling, and to reduce the required shoreline buffer area. Now, it was previously circulated that the shoreline buffer area was going to be 72.3% after some additional plantings, where 75% is required. However, it was confirmed and now requested that the shoreline buffer actually is 68.4, so less than what was previously circulated, which we were aware of, and so now the circulation's gone out with the correct number. Also, to provide some additional commentary on this, I know at the previous council meeting there was talk about relief being requested from the bylaw and how to treat these applications. Staff have had conversations with the applicant's agent on how to improve that or make the situation better, and the reality is that there already are existing development rights for that sleeping cabin to be in that location, and that they could rebuild exactly in the same footprint, and the shoreline buffer area would be no better. So as a result, the application that's before council has been framed by the applicant's agent as a net improvement, although it's still asking for relief. It's increasing what's previously there, and should they have just rebuilt in the exact same footprint and not requested an application, the shoreline buffer would even be less than what's proposed now. With respect to agency comments, the chief building official said the location on the property line is concerned that existing construction may need to be addressed to meet the Ontario Building Code, and further, they did confirmation of the septic system. The deputy treasurer had no objection, and nor did the district of Muskoka. Further to that, as previously noted at last month's meeting, the chief building official now has no concerns, as the applicant's agent did provide confirmation that a new septic system would be installed and sized appropriately. Moving then into site photos, this is looking down the driveway to the rear of the dwelling. So you can see the property in this portion is well vegetated. This is then moving to the front of the property, showing the view of the dwelling from the lake. You can see the covered patio that is part of the application, and you can also see the sand beach, which is recognized to form part of the shoreline buffer. This is then looking from the dock to the neighboring property, and you can see a similar sand beach. This is then turning and looking north at the sleeping cabin, which is proposed to be expanded. Again, you'll see here there is a lack of available buffer just due to proximity to the water. However, based on your vantage point, you can then see here at the farthest end of the sleeping cabin, there is much more dense vegetation screening from that perspective. And then this is just showing the existing location and in the area of where the expansion is to occur. Again, just showing more tree cover here around the existing sleeping cabin. This is then to the area beside the dwelling, which is proposed to be revegetated. And that patio is also proposed to come out and be revegetated as well. So again, we are looking at a relief for the shoreline buffer where 75% is normally required. However, the applicant's agent has confirmed that there will be additional plantings in an effort to bring this as close as possible to the zoning bylaw standards while recognizing that they do have existing development rights. As a result, it's staff's opinion that the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement, it conforms to the official plan, and is appropriate and represents good planning. As a result, staff are recommending that the application be approved, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Does the applicant have a presentation they wish to make? Welcome, thank you.
I believe I have a presentation on PowerPoint. Oh, thanks. All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. To all of council, my name is Bobby Leppington of Design by Bobby, 379 Regent Street, Aurelia, Ontario, L3V 4E1. We are here today to request an increase in size to an existing sleeping cabin, knowing that we had 2 and are reducing to 1. Our plan is to replace the existing sleeping cabin, the Shoreline, with a 32.5 square meter, 350 square foot sleeping cabin. This represents a 7.6 meter or an 81 square foot increase. We're proposing to maintain the same height. I guess I should, how do I work this, Adam? There we go. Okay, from the site plan, I apologize, I'm going to flip to the next photo. We are proposing to maintain the same height or volume as the current sleeping cabin. The existing sleeping cabin sits 18 inches too low into the ground, into the embankment, and it's rotting. We propose to raise that up and provide a shed-style roof to maintain the same height. Reason that's important is you can see in the background the neighboring cottage just in the background there. So we wanted to maintain the same volume and height to not change that view for the neighbors and the adjacent property. We're proposing to increase the non-conforming side yard setback to 1.6 meters, where 0.5 exists now. That's over a 1 meter improvement to allow for egress around the sleeping cabin, around increased spatial separation or fire protection, and further, a new septic system will be installed as part of this proposal. Next, we outline our proposal for the vegetative buffers. And as you can see, we have 58.5% vegetation, proposing 68.6. The increased sleeping cabin is 7.8 square meters, and the area for vegetation is 80.8, over a 10 times recapture in terms of square meters. This photo represents how development was undertaken in the past. And the fast-paced awareness in the last couple of years of the environmental impacts in the shoreline buffers have become real, and we've paid attention to them. But as little as 4 years ago, we have an LPAT decision on a sleeping cabin that was protected by the town's planning opinion for that bunkie to be expanded in the shoreline. A year and a half ago, we started this application as a minor variance. And we know that this comes at time. Why are we pursuing this today? Why do we want to move forward and increase the size of that bunkie? We want to ensure that the owner's mom can have a private, accessible place to enjoy. And with accessibility comes just that little bit more space to design. Their mom has been on the lake for over 40 years, has had to sell her cottage, and this is our proposed solution. So we're here today to say thank you and looking for your support.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak to this application? Okay. Council, are there any questions for Mr. Agar or the agent spoken today? Councillor Morphy?
Excuse me, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Normally, on these plans, we see an existing bunkie and then the proposed new. Is it going to be wider? Is it going to be more front-facing the lake, or does it go deeper away from the lake, limiting the view? Sorry.
Not sure who's going to take that, Mr. Agar or
Perhaps the applicant's agent can speak to that, but if
Okay.
we put either presentation on screen, we can show a depiction at the same time.
okay.
Absolutely, I'll just wait for that to come up on screen. It's going deeper. It's going deeper. So there was an existing, it's just not in this presentation. The existing, where it says Area 10 there at the top, you can see it in a circle. The existing cabin was much closer in that area and expanded towards the cottage. And what we're doing is bringing it away, maintaining the same setback to the water, but expanding it at the back on the left.
Okay, Counselor Jorgensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question I have because it's jumping out at me here. The existing dock appears to intrude into the space beyond the projected lot line there. I'm just wondering if you could comment on that. Is that an existing condition as well, or how come that's not being normalized? Thank you.
Mr. Aguirre?
Thank you, Your Worship. Based on the drawing provided by the applicant's agent, it would appear that the dock protrudes across the lot line. However, I don't know if that's actually the case or if that's just the way it was drawn in. They did not request any relief for that, so right now, in theory, it would not be recognized. However, they could provide that it's been in that location for a long period of time and it has existing rights, or it could come out yearly and move location slightly based on how it's anchored to shore. But the applicant's agent or the applicants would be better suited to answer the actual location and how it sits in relation to the lot line.
Maybe if we have the photo up, we might all understand a little better.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. The existing dock has been in existence there for a number of years and would exist prior to March 1999 for that legal non-conforming right. In terms of relocating it, if we ever went to do an application, we'd pull it to that 0 lot line for setback. In the bay there that it's in, the neighboring property, I know, Adam, you had a photo standing on this dock looking over. The other dock is pushed over as well to the far side. Yeah, you can see their dock pushed to the far side as well as they come down.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? I have one. How, we saw that patio is going to come up and there's going to be, I guess we're going to try and go lawn-free here. Is that a safe assumption? So how do we assure that, I mean, I'm not saying anybody's not going to do it, but it's part of the application. But how do we know? How do we follow up on that? That it's actually, and I'm just using this application as an example. I'm not, saying that somebody's not going to do it, but I'm just curious, is how do we ensure that the revegetation takes place?
Typically, Your Worship, we would use the site plan control process to understand what the extent of vegetative buffers are and where plantings are and are not occurring. Should there not be any development, though, we also have the site alteration bylaw as well, where anything that isn't necessarily triggered by traditional development, like building, but we could also enter into a site alteration and get a plan through our one of our planning administrators to assist with that, so we can get planting plans in that way. So we would look at that and then use the building department to then do a zoning compliance check to make sure that the actual shoreline buffer area meets what's being requested. So they would run that calculation and make sure that those plans are done, and then we follow up within 2 years of that agreement being put in place to make sure that the work's actually been done.
Okay, yeah, I just, I didn't mean to use you as an example, but I think it was obvious with that patio how to ask the question, just how do we follow up? So we all learned something today. Okay, is there any other questions? Okay. Mr. Ager, are there any recommendations or comments to bring to the attention of council as a result of these proceedings?
Your Worship, staff would recommend that the application be approved.
The bylaw will be considered by council later this afternoon. If there are no further questions, then I declare this public meeting to be concluded. I now declare this portion of the meeting to be a public meeting to deal with application number ZA 24-2024 for Clipsham. I will now ask the manager of planning services to please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed bylaw and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application.
Thank you, Worship. The subject property is located on the Cache River and partially on Sparrow Lake. The property is designated waterfront area in the official plan and is zoned residential waterfront RW6 as in the town zoning bylaw and as discussed in the staff report. As you can see here, the property is large and irregularly shaped parcel that's currently vacant. There's also a private road that runs through the portion of the property which services 4 dwellings on properties which do not have water frontage. And you can see that there with the yellow line moving through the area that's in red, so that's the existing private road. This application before you this afternoon was also submitted concurrently with a consent application, which was conditionally approved at last week's Committee of Adjustment, which proposed to create 1 new lot as shown in red. Based on the property's proximity to Sparrow Lake, which is classified as a provincially significant wetland, as well as on-site environmental features, an environmental impact study was completed. And that identified both building envelopes as well as docking envelopes. And on screen here, you can see areas that are shaded red, blue, and sort of a red hatched area here and here. To simplify matters, anything that's colored is being rezoned to environmental protection in accordance with the recommendations of the environmental impact study. So the zoning application that's before you today is to implement those recommendations. So rezoning anything that's really shown here in color to environmental protection. It also establishes docking envelopes and building envelopes. With respect to agency comments, the chief building official had no objection to the proposed application. The manager of revenue, no objection. The infrastructure technologist, no objection. Fire and emergency services, no objection, subject to Ontario Fire Code and Building Code. The District of Muskoka provided comments of no objection, subject to the appropriate development control techniques to be used to implement the recommendations of the environmental impact study. Those development control techniques including the rezoning of the land that's before you today. So all the colored portions here being put into environmental protection. The zoning also establishing the building envelopes. So just on screen there, that's one of the building envelopes, as well as the docking envelope here. That will all be done through the zoning bylaw. Further to that, the properties, should they be developed, be subject to site plan control as well. In addition to that, a neighbor provided a list of 29 questions that planning staff answered all of the questions with the help of the applicant's agent as well, prior to this coming forward to the public meeting today. This is then moving to site photos. This is then the existing right-of-way, so that yellow line that you saw across the property. This is standing there. This shows the general topography and tree cover for the majority of the lot. You can also see a neighboring dwelling to the immediate right. So this property is vacant, but there would be one of the landlocked parcels. This is then moving to the east end of the right-of-way, and this is some of the wetland areas typical throughout the property. So you saw all those different colorations on the environmental piece. So this would be a portion of the property that's going to be put into environmental protection. This then would be on the retained lot and looking more towards a developable building envelope. Although it is treed in the photo, it was more high and dry and outside of the wetland areas. And this is another vantage point in a more cleared out area on that retained lot. This is then looking towards the Severn River, and then Sparrow Lake would be off to the left-hand side and approximately the area where the permitted docking envelope would be. The docking envelope is actually very specific to in the zoning bylaw. It only extends 4 meters and it's a T shape, so the extension of the T is a 2 by 2 meter square, and then the T shape is 5 meters in length, but only 2 meters in depth, so it only actually extends out into the river 4 meters. And this is another vantage point of the Cache River. And then with respect to the severed lot, there was an abundance of building areas. It seemed there were more available building envelopes, and this area is characterized by that. So in conclusion, it's staff's opinion that the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the official plan, is appropriate, and represents good planning. As a result, staff are recommending the application be approved, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ager. Is the agent or applicant here for presentation? Welcome.
Rick McCann, 1038 Cowbell Lane, Severn Bridge, P0E 1 Norman 0. I'm agent for the Clipsham family, and I'll be available if there's any particularly easy questions to ask. Thank you.
You can take the hard ones too, I'm sure. Okay. There any members of the public who wanted to speak to this application? Okay. Seeing none. Council, are there any questions for the agent or manager of planning? Okay. Wow. Okay, we're just moving right along here. Great. So with that, Mr. Ager, are there any recommendations you'd like to bring to the attention of council?
Your worship, staff would recommend the application be approved.
The bylaw will be considered by council later this afternoon. If there are no further questions, then I declare this public meeting to be completed. I now declare this portion of the meeting to be a public meeting to deal with application number ZA 30-2024 for Agnelli Barafato Spears. I will now ask the Manager of Planning Services to please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed bylaw and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application.
Thank you, Your Worship. Subject property is located on Lake Muskoka. The property is designated waterfront, residential waterfront, subject to special provision 1258 in the town zoning bylaw and is designated waterfront area as discussed in the staff report. There's currently no dwelling on the property. However, a sleeping cabin is currently under construction to replace a sleeping cabin that had previously existed, and that's the structure that you see on screen here. This was a sleeping cabin, and this is a shoreline storage building. There's also a concrete retaining wall along most of the water frontage. The application was submitted in order to permit a new dwelling to be located at a setback of 20 meters from the optimal summer water level of Lake Muskoka, where 30 meters is required. A planning justification report was prepared by Morgan Planning and Development, Inc., and the applicant's agent had provided the rationale that the intention of reducing the setback was to preserve a large maple tree, as well as to reduce site alteration through blasting. The proposed 20-meter setback would also not be out of character with the surrounding area. At the time of writing the report, the chief building official, the infrastructure technologist, and the fire and emergency services all had no objections. The District of Muskoka, no objection. And the neighboring property owner to the south, so that would be the neighbor in this direction, has concerns about construction trucks blocking their property. The applicants have been made aware of these concerns. This is then looking into the property from the existing driveway. The large maple trees can be seen on screen here to the right-hand side. Then moving and looking back up to the road, the neighboring property owner that had some concern would be the dwelling that you see onto the left-hand side. You'll also see a chain link fence, which staff believe to be the property line. That would be over here. The applicant's agent was able to stake the approximate building location on site. So throughout the photos, you'll see numerous orange stakes which identify that building envelope. This is the existing shoreline storage building on site and the existing sleeping cabin as well. Council may recall this property has actually been before this council before to recognize the existing lot size. That's what the existing special provisions on the property for, as well as to permit the sleeping cabin to be located in the shoreline development area. As the existing sleeping cabin on the property was in disrepair, it's being replaced in the same location. Then turning back towards the driveway at the approximate setback. And again, we can then see a building stake here in the foreground, marking out the site for development. And then up as the property does slope upwards from the lake. It's also worth mentioning the applicant has confirmed that there will need to be some blasting with respect to the septic location, but the intention of putting the dwelling in this was that there did not need to be further blasting for the dwelling itself. However, the applicant's agent may be able to speak to that more. In addition, staff are of the opinion that the application's consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the official plan, is appropriate and represents good planning. As a result, staff are recommending that the application be approved, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay. I'm going to go to the agent or applicant if they're here. Like to make a presentation?
Good afternoon. I'm Kent Lee Larry Spears, 3614 Henshaw Place in Burlington, Ontario. The reason we're asking for relief from the 30-meter setback is mainly because of the septic. The rear of the property is pretty much all exposed bedrock, and the mantle of the septic is actually almost encroaching on the footprint of the building. So in order to achieve the proper septic, we're requesting to move the building forward. And in doing so, we're hoping to save the roots from that tree by eliminating or reducing blasting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Stick around, there might be some questions. Okay, are there any members of the public who'd like to speak to this application? Okay, seeing none. Council, are there any questions for the agent or staff? Okay. Okay. Great. No, oh, Councillor Morphy?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. It's not before us today, but under most circumstances, a concrete wall would not be permitted on our shorelines. Do we have any steps to take that, should it fail, that we can make the shoreline more in character with the landscape? As that could be considered?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Morphy. While not a biologist, it would be difficult to not cause further harm by ripping it out completely. However, there is opportunities through the site plan, because they are building a new dwelling, to actually ensure that additional plantings will happen. They are still held to the same requirement regardless of the concrete shoreline or shore wall being there. They still need to maintain 75% natural landscape, just like every other residential waterfront property. So we'll be looking for that planting through the site plan process.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? Okay, Mr. Egger, as a result of these proceedings, do you have a recommendation for council?
Thank you, Your Worship. As detailed in the staff report, staff are recommending the application be approved.
Okay, thank you. The bylaw will be considered by council later this afternoon. If there are no further questions, then I declare this public meeting to be completed. I now declare this portion of the meeting to be a public meeting to deal with application number SRC 03-2024 for Franklin. I will now ask for any comments by the applicants or their agent. Okay. Seeing none. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak to this? Seeing none. Council, are there any questions or comments on the Shore Road closure? Okay, seeing none. I will now ask the Director of Development Services, Melissa Halford. Oh, welcome, Ms. Halford. If there are any recommendations or comments to bring to the attention of council as a result of these proceedings.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Staff would recommend approval of the application as proposed.
The bylaw will be considered by council very shortly this afternoon. If there are no further questions, then I declare this public meeting to be concluded. Okay, council, I think, are you serious? I was just gonna say, everybody's okay just to roll right into bylaws? Okay, great. So, it is moved by Councillor Johnston, second by Councillor Jorgensen. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read, passed, and engrossed into the bylaw book. Bylaw number 2024-101, zoning McIntyre, Severn River. Bylaw number 2024-102, zoning Siglin and Rowan, Loon Lake. Bylaw number 2024-103, zoning Clipsham, Sparrow Lake. Bylaw number 2024-104, zoning Agnelli, Barafato, Spears, Lake Muskoka. And bylaw number 2024-105, Shore Road Closure, Franklin, Sparrow Lake. Council, does anybody want to do anything with any of those? Okay. So I'll ask for you to vote on those, please. That carries, thank you. It's moved by Councillor Morphy, second by Councillor Robinson. Be it resolved that the minutes of the council meeting dated September 24, 2024 be approved as circulated. All in favor, please vote. That carries, thank you. And before I wrap it up, I want you to all bank this in your memories when we're here till like 6:30, another planning council meeting. So you gotta pass today. So thanks. Thanks. It is moved by Councillor Strength, second by Councillor Varney. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2024-106 to confirm the council meeting held on October 22nd, 2024 be passed. Please vote. That carries, thank you. And a motion to adjourn, Councillor Varney and Councillor Robinson. All in favor, please vote. Councillor Johnston, did you have something do you want to say? Great, okay, perfect.
That's why
Oh, I didn't see it. There you go, okay, great.
I have something to say.
Okay, go ahead.
It would be childish if I didn't after I put my light on, wouldn't it? Your Worship, this is not a planning issue. It's not even a council issue, but it's, I think, a matter of interest. And I won't have this opportunity to talk to the assembled group here about something until next month. On Thanksgiving Sunday, my Canadian family and I, we went for a walk with my 2-year-old grandson in the Barrens, a very beloved and popular attraction in Muskoka. And the reason I bring it up is that I remember being part of a group, was that last spring when we went out there? Oh, yes, we went to clean. Yeah, and I was so proud of doing that. My 2-year-old grandson, who was being raised as a environmental activist, he was picking up garbage and handing it to me. I had a bag. It was far worse, 10 times worse than what we saw. And I remember Councillor Cairns and I, on our little trails, commenting on how adults could denigrate such a beautiful spot. And I mean, there were places where there was piles of beer cans, Coke cans, garbage in the fire pits. It was awful. And so I wanted to bring that to council's attention. And maybe it's something, Your Worship, that I don't remember who asked us to do that before. Was it CLB?
I'm not sure, but we certainly can look at organizing a team building and send council out to do that if there's an interest in doing that. So
Yeah,
we'll
I
keep
mean,
it in mind.
if the summer continues, we're in summer again. Somebody mentioned at the, I was mentioning this to some of the wonderful students that talked at the conference that I referred to yesterday, and said, you know, that if council or a group in town wants to do something this summer that we're back in, they'd be happy to help. So I'm not suggesting that we do it now, but I'm just saying that there are maybe some people that would be willing to help, either this summer or, or next spring.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. Okay.
Thank you.
I think we did adjourn, did we not, Madam Clerk?